What is up, everybody? My name is Blue Drake. I am one of the lead developers for this game, although lots of people have come together to make this game happen, so it's not just me working on this. We're actually going to be talking about the latest development blog recently, and I think I'm actually going to start doing more videos talking about progress of the game in a nice, relaxed fashion where you all can ask questions in the comments and I can go over everything that we've done. Now, these development blogs are actually written by our community management team, which is led by Chach and Gooms from Blacksite. Blacksite is actually another company that I own with two other members on the development team, one of which is Gooms. And for those of you who do not know, Blacksite manages a lot of the stuff that Drakeling Labs doesn't really manage as much, such as community management and record keeping, things that aren't as much fun to do but still need to be done. And that way, Drakeling Labs and its team can focus entirely on developing the game, and Blacksite and its team can focus entirely on keeping you all up to date with everything that's happening and engaging with the community. It's a really great team dynamic that has helped us a lot over the past couple of years, and hopefully will continue going on like that for as long as Operation Harsh Doorstop is in active development. Alright, so let's get into this. First off, this whole section talks about all of the preparation work that we've been doing for the launch of the single-player demo in late March 30th to be exact. This has been a big milestone for us. We haven't had a hard date that we were sure we could hit until recently, and I know that we've put out roadmaps, but I really want to have to reiterate, with how our development team works and how low budget we are, things are just going to be very difficult for us to put down on a hard date. So that's one of the reasons we rarely give out dates, and the dates that we do give out, we're very hesitant to double down on and make official dates. March 30th is an official date for us. We're confident that we can hit that. Anything else, though, if it does say that it's subject to change, keep that in mind. It's very subject to change. And the main things that we were wanting to do is we wanted to get the whole main menu user interface and the whole in-game user interface a big facelift. We're at this point where I think the game can start standing on its own a little bit. Not to say that there's not a lot more work to do, but it now feels less like a prototype and more like a functional first version of a game, and we wanted to make sure that the user interface felt like that too. It's been kind of placeholder, kind of like programmer UI, if you will, for a while, and we wanted to just put in an extra effort to make it have that extra level of professionalism and polish that you would think would come with a more proper release. So that has been definitely a big chunk of our time. Our UI developer, Volume Infinite, he went in and he actually did a whole pass, and our programming team took his work and interpreted it and put it in. And to this day, we're actually still working on a couple of things with the main menu user interface. In fact, one of the things that we're working on right now is the single player interface. So that way, in order to go into a single player match, you can customize the bots, you can customize the factions, you can customize, everything about that match before you go in without having to use the console commands. Obviously, that was really important to us before launching the demo. The demo has just got to be accessible. It's got to be playable. No console commands to put in bots. No console commands to, change basic things in the match before you go in. So that's been a big chunk of the work. Another thing that we've been doing is a lot of the characters in the game currently are just clones of one another. So we've got, one character for the PMC, one character for the Allies in World War II, one character for the Russians. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to go through and we wanted to start creating more variety. Obviously, long term, we would love to have a full-blown character customization system, but in order to get there, not only do we have to do a lot of development work on the actual character system to allow that, which is a lot of work, but we also have to create all of the pieces of equipment, all of the jackets, all of the headphones, everything that you could potentially customize in the future, we have to make now. So we figured a good way to do that would be to create a whole bunch of different character classes that have all of the little bits and pieces that long term we hope will be fully customizable for character. But for now, we're going to set it up so all of the different classes have unique characters for them. Now, the way this is actually going to work is when you spawn in as a character, you'll spawn in as that class, but when you pick up a weapon on the battlefield, the only thing that'll change is you'll just pick up a different weapon. You're not going to change the entire character unless you actually respawn. And it's going to be kind of similar to like how Battlefield works. So like if you spawn in with a ghillie suit, but then you pick up like an M240 Bravo, you're not going to instantly change into something else. You're still going to have that ghillie suit, just with an M240 in your hands. So that's been a big thing that we needed to do. And another thing that we needed to do is we've wanted to create new animations for all of our third-person characters. And the reason for this is the first version of Operation Harsh Doorstop, we were actually using marketplace assets for our third-person animations. But we have recently gotten a third-person animator, and he is actually going through and doing all of the animations from scratch for us, which is really, really cool. Now, these are still handmade animations. These are not mocapped. Unfortunately, we don't have the budget for mocap right now, but hey, maybe if the Patreon explodes, we can have a budget for that in the future. But I think that these look really, really good. And there's still a couple of bugs with the previous iteration of the third-person animation system that we're still looking to fix. You know, issues like with the characters moonwalking and kind of like the animations sometimes not playing correctly. Some of those things just needed to be tweaked by the animator himself. So obviously when we launch the demo, we want all of those animations to be working perfectly. So that's been a big focus for us. And then lastly, one of the final things that we wanted to do is we wanted to get in the voice callouts. So you'll notice when you play the game now, assuming you have access to it, you'll actually have the AI talk. So they'll actually say things, whether they're reloading, if they're taking fire, and this is kind of like an initial implementation that we really want to expand in the future. This is something that I really want to make a bigger feature going forward. From the beginning, I wanted Operation Harsh Doorstop to be a little bit different from your standard tactical shooter. You've got games like Ready or Not, you've got games like Ground Branch, which have a really strong single-player component, but are more like small-scale games. You've got games like Squad and Hell Let Loose have got big, large-scale combat, but there's no single-player component. I want to have Operation Harsh Doorstop meet in the middle. I want to have a really strong single-player component, but really large open maps. And I think that it's totally possible to create super immersive, maybe even story-driven moments on big open maps. That's a big focus for me. And I think that the voice callouts is just the beginning of a feature that I really want to get into over time. The bots are something that I really want to start expanding on and making more complex. And we've already been experimenting with really interesting features that I think are going to be really, really cool. So for instance, here soon we're going to be having it so the AI actually follow the officer around. If the officer gets shot or the squad leader gets shot, they'll have voice lines for that, like officer down. You know, if their buddies get shot, they'll react to that. And over time, we're going to have it so the actual AI can give medical assistance. They can rearm other people. They can use other pieces of equipment, but they can also use different types of strategies. We want to get to a point where not only are the AI going to be cohesive as a squad, but you'll have some squads that will be more aggressive and be on the offensive. Some squads will be more on the defensive. You'll maybe have squads that will randomly decide to patrol in certain areas. And when we add in construction, I want to have it so the bots will actually be able to construct forward outposts all by themselves as well. So they'll actually be able to run logistics by themselves. They'll be able to drive vehicles by themselves as well, although I'm sure the bots won't be able to drive vehicles as well as players in some cases. But we do want to have it so the bots aren't just replacement for players. We want to have it so bots are kind of like an extension of the game, almost like Titanfall. In fact, at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if we make it so bots don't even really show up on the player scoreboard and are just a part of the game world. Like you just play the game and just bots are part of it, and they're either helping to run logistics or in some cases maybe doing other tasks that are a little bit more boring, but super critical. For instance, you know, I remember playing Project Reality. The one thing that nobody wanted to do but needed to be done in order to win the game was running mortars. Having a good artillery position or a mortar fob was crucial to winning the game, but if you had a team and nobody wanted to do that job, you were going to lose. In this case, you could maybe have it so the bots themselves could set up artillery positions and man those artillery positions, and then players could request fire missions and the bots could react to that. That's the kind of stuff that I want to implement over time that I think could be really cool and really game-changing for something like Operation Harsh Doorstop. All right, so moving on. Obviously, there's a lot of other progress that we're making on other fronts in terms of content. We're actually kind of slowing down content production right now. There was a big explosion of content when we really wanted to get in a lot of content to showcase the flexibility of the platform and to just add more playability to the game. So we had World War I, we had World War II, Vietnam. We're still working on content, but now our objective is to focus on cleaning up everything that we've made and making the game a really solid experience. I think we've got enough really good initial maps to kind of illustrate what the game can be. Now all I want to do is just make those maps look great, make those maps feel great, and make the content we have just really feel fresh and clean. So that way we can hopefully go forward, use that as a showcase of what we can do, raise a whole bunch of Patreon supporters, and then tackle the next big objective, which is going to be, you know, adding even more content, more features and stuff like that. So some of the maps that have gotten a lot of love recently look really good. And in fact, this is actually one thing that I'm really hoping to tackle going forward. You'll notice that some of the maps in Operation Harsh Doorstop look amazing, and some of the maps in Operation Harsh Doorstop could look better. And that's because there really has been a different amount of focus on different maps. Lam Dong is one of the maps that I think looks absolutely incredible. So we're really proud of this. In fact, all of this we've actually created ourselves. So this is something that took a lot of work to create. Aranabel, who works on our foliage, actually created all of this foliage from scratch. So a lot of these are using entirely custom foliage sets. That's kind of what we're in the process of doing right now. The first versions of Operation Harsh Doorstop were more of a prototype that relied more heavily on marketplace assets just so we could show the idea functioning. But now that we've got a functional prototype and a game that works, we're going through and replacing everything with our own work because that's the next step. Not only to show that we're capable of doing it, but also so that way we can achieve kind of like aesthetics and looks that are more unique and more specific to certain theaters of war where there just are no asset packs for some of the things that we're trying to do. So Kafji is a map that kind of still needs a lot of love. We've actually updated a whole bunch of parts of it, but it's such a large map that in order to get it to the same level as some of the other maps that have a lot of love, it's just going to take a lot more time. But one of the things that we have done recently is we have played around with different lighting systems. Because our lighting is dynamic, we can actually relatively easily create a whole bunch of different dynamic lighting scenarios that randomly change depending on the map and depending on when you start the map. Hopefully over time we can have it so there's even dynamically shifting times of day during the course of the battle. That is something that could totally happen. It's totally possible. So that is something that we've actually been experimenting with all of the different types of maps. I think that it's really added to the replayability, and that's a feature, especially when we start adding in like lights and night vision. That's something that could really be an interesting gameplay mechanic. Here are the animations that our animator has been creating, and in addition to that, here is our first-person animator. These are all of the new weapons that we have either just implemented or have been reanimated. So for instance, here's the RPG. We've actually done a lot of work on making better animations for certain weapons, as well as creating dynamic or procedural animations in addition to the hand animated stuff to make these weapons be more impactful. So for instance, the RPG right now, you can see when he fires it in here, there's not really much of like a recoil. It's just kind of a little bit. That's because a lot of our recoil and a lot of the effects of shooting a gun is now procedural in the game. So when you shoot a gun, there's a big procedural element, so that big thump, the camera shake, all of that stuff, it can be tweaked in game. And that's a big quality of life thing that we really wanted to ensure was done right. Here's all of the new grenade animations that we've done, as well as some reanimated stuff for the M16 and AK-74 to fit with the new procedural animation system that we have implemented recently. And another example of some maps that have gotten some real love and some great treatment is Monte Cassino. So as you can see, if you've played Monte Cassino recently, you'll hopefully notice that Monte Cassino looks completely different, and that's because our developer Miha went through and recreated all of the foliage from scratch to have it be more accurate for that area. So if you play Monte Cassino, you'll notice it's a completely different map now. Again, hopefully something that we're going to be able to get for things like CAF-G or even different parts of Risala, the Fallujah map, to look as good as some of the other maps that we've really put a lot of love into. Obviously, Lam Dong has gotten a lot of love as well. Now, one of the things that we've been working on recently is some of the stuff for future features. I don't want to lie to you. A big focus right now is cleaning up the current version of the game. So big ticket items like vehicles and stuff like that, while we've laid a lot of groundwork for those are things that we are not currently focusing on. However, we have been doing some preliminary work on top of the groundwork that we did actually a couple of years ago to get ready for us to start implementing vehicles when that time comes. Again, vehicles and the full construction system and some of that stuff that we're looking to implement, it's going to be a lot of work. So that's a big reason why we're taking the current build of the game, we're polishing it up, and we're going to try and use that to get more funding, get more Patreon supporters, and spread the word, so that way when we actually start implementing vehicles, we have enough backing where we can confidently push all of our guys into that and finish it in a really quality way, and not, you know, lose momentum halfway through, because that's going to be a big chunk to bite off. So we have been doing some preliminary work for that. One of the big things is we're actually creating low poly vehicles and low poly kind of like prototype vehicles, so that way when we do start implementing vehicles and there are things that we need to test or experiment with, I don't want to have to ask somebody to make a full high definition, high poly vehicle asset, and then when they're done and they put in all of this work, we start implementing vehicles, and then we have to come back to them and say, hey, by the way, we realize that you have to change this in order to work with this feature that we're implementing for vehicles. That's going to drive them nuts. That's going to give them a massive headache. That's actually kind of part of my job as the director of all of this, to make sure that we're not contracting anybody to do more work than they should, that we're not wasting time, that we're not wasting money. So one of the things that we're doing is we're making low poly vehicles and very kind of like, you know, less high quality vehicles that we can use to implement the first version of vehicles, so that way if there's anything that we need to change or cut off or move around or drastically, you know, switch up for the vehicles, it's not going to be a massive headache for the vehicle artists. It's just going to be a slight change. And then once we have the vehicle system just perfect and working exactly the way that we want, then we can hire people, the big boys, to come in and you know, because it's going to cost a lot. It'll probably be a couple grand, if not more, for a really high quality vehicle asset. So, you know, when we get to that point of making that expense, I want to make sure that our system that those vehicles are going to plug into is just fully done, and that there's going to be no question that the vehicles that we're hiring people to create is going to work with that. So that's a big thing that we're preparing on, but right now we're still focusing on cleaning up the existing version of the game so we can raise backers and get to that point where we can really push through with vehicles. Another thing as well that's been going on, we have a whole bunch of people on the team, especially some of our community managers that also kind of like moonlight as a developer. Some of the guys from Black Site have been modding the game, creating mods, experimenting with different features. One of the ones that they've been experimenting with is the blood system. We were previously working on kind of like more gore and more blood back in the day, but we had to put a pause on that while we focused on cleaning up some of the underlying mechanics in the game. Now that the game is getting to a point where we can actually launch the single-player version and it's a lot more professional, some of the guys are going through and revisiting some of the stuff like blood splatter and other things like that, which we could hopefully implement in the future. And another prototype that some of the community members have been like modding and playing around with is night vision. So the same member of the team that was actually experimenting with the blood stuff is also working on the night vision. This is Chach from Black Site, by the way. Chach is the one that's experimenting with this stuff, and he actually implemented his own version of night vision that we've been playing around with, and that's really, really cool. Again, not a focus right now, but it's definitely something that in the future we might implement, and we love it when people on the team experiment with different things, because you never know. Some of that stuff just happens organically. And then obviously the UI overhaul has been a big aspect of our work. If you notice, there's going to be a whole new chat window. No more messages are going to be cut off halfway through, so we've had a big quality of life update to the chat system. We've also implemented new systems for stance indication. We have a whole new UI for indicating whether you're capturing an objective, as well as new UI that shows the optics that you have selected, the fire mode, and how many magazines remaining. Again, all of these things are work in progress, and they might change in the future, but I really like the way this looks as opposed to the previous look for Operation Harsh Doorstop. And then beyond that, another thing that we've been working on, which again is a little bit further in the future, but eventually we want to create a way more in-depth interaction system, so that way you can have complex interactions with stuff around you, whether that's getting in a vehicle, rearming off of a ammo bag, picking up weapons, or anything else. We want to really have a nice, robust UI for interacting with both things in the world and also interacting with yourself. So self-interaction for maybe either healing yourself or even possibly accessing admin controls, similar to maybe how Arma would operate with their dynamic interaction system, but we want to have an improvement on that. So if you want to check that out, that is definitely something we've been experimenting with. We've been having different ideas on having pop-ups and menus that are expandable and kind of future-proof for interacting with the world, and that's something that I'm actually pretty excited about to continue prototyping. Probably not going to make its way into the game anytime soon, but I think that kind of gives you an idea of where Operation Harsh Doorstop is headed. And besides that, there's been ongoing work to the audio. I know a lot of you guys have been saying that our audio is a little bit subpar, and I have to agree with you. The audio is not at a point right now where we think it is finished, but another thing I really have to double down on is we've never really said that the audio is finished. The audio is very work in progress. Getting quality audio is very difficult because for a gun model, it's easy to just find somebody who can make a gun model at home, but with audio, unless you're going off of asset packs, and honestly, asset packs, all of the different assets, they're recorded in completely different ways. They have inconsistent kind of like quality. If you really want a good, high quality library of gun sounds, you kind of got to make it yourself, and that's something that we're working on right now. But finding somebody that has access to all of the guns that we need, that can shoot them whenever they want, wherever they want, is kind of hard. We actually have a new engineer who is just that. We have a developer that has access to a whole bunch of firearms, and he's been recording them, and a lot of the sounds that you've been hearing in the game right now that in my opinion sound significantly better are actually from his work. So that's something that we're hoping is going to be an ongoing improvement over time. If you all have anybody who is interested in helping out with the audio, you could actually create your own audio pack, upload it as a mod. If you have access to firearms and high quality recording equipment, please let us know. we would happily bring you on board. Besides that, that is basically everything for today. As always, if you want to join our Discord, or if you want to sign up on the website, or hit us up anywhere else, feel free. And of course, if you want to support the project, make sure you go and support on Patreon. It makes a huge difference. That's the only way we're going to be able to get this game done. And the more supporters we have, the faster we're going to be able to work, and the more things we're going to be able to do. That's it from me. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I'll see you on the battlefield very soon.